It was the middle of July, and the ranger at the Death Valley trailhead read 124 degrees on the gauge bolted to the post beside her station. 3 men climbed out of their vehicle in the kind of mood that fills a parking lot, loud, laughing, certain. They had matching attitudes and a single small cooler between them. And when she walked over to warn them, they told her they had done harder things than a desert walk. She watched them start out anyway. She would remember that none of the 3 looked back, and she would remember the exact minute. Because in Death Valley in July, the clock is the only thing that tells the truth. What follows is a dramatization, inspired by real events and real conditions in the hottest place on Earth. The men are composite, the desert is exactly what it is. The ranger had 8 years in the park and a flat, unhurried way of talking that came from delivering the same warning 1,000 times to people who had already decided not to hear it. She had started in cooler parks farther north and transferred south because someone had to work the hot stations, and over 8 summers she had built the kind of knowledge that does not come from a manual. She knew the numbers that visitors did not. She knew that the air temperature on the gauge was the optimistic number, that the ground in the open sun ran 30 or 40 degrees hotter, that a person standing still out there was being cooked from below as much as from above. She knew that Death Valley holds the highest air temperature ever reliably recorded on the surface of the planet, and that the desert does not need to reach that record to kill you. It only needs an afternoon. She had pulled people out of this exact stretch of ground who had set out feeling exactly as good as these 3 men felt climbing out of their vehicle. She had also helped recover the ones nobody pulled out in time, and those were the faces that came back to her in the parking lot whenever she watched a confident group walk past her toward the open ground. The good feeling is the trap. The good feeling is what the desert hands you for free, right up until it takes everything back at once. She gave them the warning she gave 40 times a day in July. The heat would not feel like heat until it was too late. Their bodies would lose water faster than they could ever drink it back, and out here, there was none to find, no shade worth the name, no rescue that arrived in minutes instead of hours. She told them the single small cooler they were carrying held a fraction of what one of them would need, let alone 3, and that the warm bottled water inside it would do nothing for them an hour from now when they were a mile out and the day had really started. She told them the afternoon was the worst part of the day and they were starting straight into it, that the smart hikers in this place moved before dawn and were back at their vehicles before the sun cleared the ridges, and that the time on the clock was already wrong for what they were about to do. And she told them the thing that the park puts on every sign, the thing that visitors smile at and locals never do, that the desert does not care how strong you are. That strength is the thing that gets strong men into trouble out here, because strength is what lets you walk too far before your body forces you to stop. They laughed. Not cruelly, just easily, the laugh of men who had spent their lives being the biggest and the loudest in every room, and had never once been wrong about what their bodies could do. One of them told her they worked out, as if that were an answer. One of them said they would be fine, they always were. The third said nothing and waved a hand at her, the universal gesture for an old worry that does not apply to him, and that wave was the whole thing in a single motion. The warning had not landed on any of the 3, because the warning was about limits. And these were men who had built their entire idea of themselves on not having any. She logged the time. She watched them go. The desert would do the explaining she could not. Here is what none of the 3 understood, and what the ranger understood completely. In extreme heat, the body has exactly one tool for cooling itself, and that tool is sweat. As long as sweat is leaving your skin and evaporating, it pulls heat with it, and you stay alive. But sweat is made of water, and water in Death Valley is a fixed account with no deposits. In that kind of heat, a working body burns through a liter and a half, sometimes 2 liters an hour, and the dry air carries it off so fast you never feel wet, never feel the loss, never get the soaked shirt warning that tells a person in a humid climate to stop. The 3 men felt dry and comfortable and strong, and the whole time the account was draining. And the bigger the body, the faster it drains, because a large muscular frame generates more heat doing the same work and needs more water to shed it. Which means the strongest looking man in any group is usually the one closest to the edge without knowing it. When the water runs out, the sweating slows. When the sweating slows, the cooling stops. And when the cooling stops, the core temperature climbs with nothing to hold it back. Above 104 degrees inside the body, the organs begin to fail and the brain starts to go, judgment first, then coordination, then consciousness, and the desert finishes in minutes what it spent hours setting up. None of it announces itself. There is no pain that says turn around now. There is only a man feeling strong, then feeling off, then not feeling much of anything at all. The first mile felt like nothing, it always does. The ground was flat and open, the kind of terrain that looks like an easy walk from a parking lot, and the 3 men moved fast, still talking, still high on the certainty that the ranger was one more cautious person they had proven wrong. They passed the cooler around, they drank when they were thirsty, which felt frequent enough to be safe and was nowhere near enough to keep up, and they did not ration, because rationing is for people who believe they can run out. The sun climbed, their shadows shrank to nothing under their feet. There was no landmark to measure progress against, just the same bright, flat ground running out to mountains that never seemed to get closer. The kind of distance that makes a person walk further than they mean to, because nothing tells them how far they have gone. The temperature did not fall as the afternoon wore on the way it does in gentler places. It rose, and the ground rose with it, throwing the day's stored heat back up at them through the soles of their shoes, so that they were walking through heat from above and standing on heat from below, with no cool surface anywhere in the world they could see. The ranger back at her station had already done the only thing left to her. She had logged the time they started and the time she expected them back, and she had begun to watch the road. She had seen this group before in different bodies in different summers, 3 friends or 4 egging each other on, nobody willing to be the first to say it was too much, the whole group held hostage to the pride of its loudest member. She knew the way that dynamic works in the heat, how a man who would turn around alone will keep walking in a group because turning around means being the one who could not take it. She knew that the same loyalty and competition that had pulled them out of the vehicle would keep them moving long past the point where any single one of them alone would have quit. She had watched it play out enough times to know that the danger scaled with the number of people, not against it. That a group did not make a desert walk safer the way it made a city street safer, because the thing you needed out here was not strength in numbers, but a single honest voice willing to say, "Stop." And pride is very good at making sure that voice never speaks. The group was the engine. The group was also the trap. Out there in that heat, it would not save them. It would only make sure they failed together. The cracks started somewhere in the second hour, the way they always start, quietly and in one man first. The biggest of the three, the one who had told the ranger they worked out, began to feel it before the others because the biggest body makes the most heat and burns the most water doing it. His head began to pound, a deep rhythmic ache behind the eyes that he tried to blink away. His stomach turned, and the thought of drinking the warm water in the cooler made it worse. He stopped talking, which for him was the loudest signal of all. And when one of the others asked if he was all right, he said he was fine, because saying anything else in front of the other two was not something his pride would allow. He had spent his whole life being the strong one. He was not going to be the one who called it, so they kept walking. The cooler was nearly empty now, the water in it warm as bath water, and the realization that there was not enough left for the walk back was beginning to settle over all three of them without any of them saying it out loud. Each of them did the same quiet arithmetic and reached the same answer and said nothing, because saying it would mean admitting the ranger had been right, and admitting the ranger had been right was the one thing none of them had come out here prepared to do. This is the part the ranger had seen coming from the parking lot, the part that makes the group dynamic so much deadlier than walking alone. Each man was now hiding how bad he felt from the other two. Each was using the other's apparent strength as evidence that he should be able to keep going. None of them could see that all three were running the same secret calculation, all three were failing on the same schedule, and all three were holding the group together by refusing to be the one who broke. The thing they had treated as their advantage, that they were tough, that they did this kind of thing together, that they pushed each other, had become the mechanism that walked all three of them past the point of no return at exactly the same time. By the time the first man went down, they were too far out for it to be survivable. He stopped, sat, and could not get back up, and the sitting down was not a decision so much as a system shutting off. His skin had gone from soaked to dry, the worst sign there is, the body out of water to sweat with and out of ways to cool itself. He was confused. He could not track what the others were saying, answering questions that had not been asked, reaching for words that would not come. His core temperature had climbed into the range where the brain itself begins to fail, and the two men standing over him, both of them deep into their own version of the same collapse, did not have the water, the strength, or the clear thinking left to do anything about it. They tried to get him up. They could not lift him, not because he was too heavy, though he was, but because they had nothing left in their own arms to lift with. There was no shade to drag him to. There was no cool ground anywhere. There was only open desert in every direction and a sun that did not move fast enough to matter. And three men who had walked out of a parking lot a few hours earlier, joking about a warning now reduced to one on the ground and two who could barely stand over him. One of the two still standing tried to go for help. This is the decision the desert sets up and then punishes, the instinct that feels like courage and functions like a death sentence. A person who keeps moving in that heat, already dehydrated, already overheating, with no water left, burns through whatever margin remains faster than a person who stays still, and the vehicle was miles back across ground that had only gotten hotter since they crossed it. He told himself he could make it. He had always been able to make it. He did not make it far. The exertion that felt like rescue was the last thing his body had, and the same loop that had taken the first man took him too. The sweating stopped, the heat climbed, the mind went, and somewhere out on that flat, bright ground, alone, separated from the other two, he sat down the way the first man had and did not get up. The third stayed where he was, beside his friend, because moving was no longer something his body would do, and the staying was not loyalty so much as the end of options. He had run out of the thing that had carried him out there. They all had. The strength was gone, and underneath it there had never been anything else to fall back on. No water, no shade, no margin, nothing the desert had not already counted. The ranger raised the alarm when they did not come back on schedule, and the response went out as fast as a response can go in a place built to defeat one. But a rescue in Death Valley in the heat of a July afternoon is a slow, brutal thing. The distances are enormous. The heat that took the men works on the rescuers too, and a search team can only move so fast and stay so long before the desert starts working on them as well. A helicopter's lift suffers in air that hot and thin, the rotors clawing for purchase in a sky that gives them less to grab, and the ground search has to cross the same furnace on foot, rationing their own water, watching their own people for the same signs the three men had ignored. Every part of saving a life out there is slower and harder than the thing that ended it, and the desert knows this the way the canyon knows it, the way every place that kills people quietly knows it. By the time anyone reached the place the three men had walked to, the desert had already finished what it started in the parking lot hours earlier, when three strong men laughed at a warning and a ranger logged the time. They had not been separated by much. The desert does not need much room. The three of them died within hours of starting a walk they had been told, plainly and in advance, would kill them. They died fast, the way the desert kills the strong and the confident, the ones whose bodies make the most heat and whose pride keeps them moving longest. They died in the order their sizes and their certainties predicted, the biggest and loudest first, the others close behind, undone by the exact quality they had come to show off. Everything the ranger told them in the parking lot came true in the order she said it. The water ran out, the sweating stopped, the cooling failed, and the strength they were so sure of turned out to be the thing that carried them too far to come back. The ranger had 8 years of this. She knew, standing in that parking lot, that the warning would not land, because she could see in the way they moved and laughed and waved her off that these were not men who believed in limits. And a warning is only as good as a person's willingness to imagine themselves stopped. She had no power to hold them. You cannot arrest an adult for taking a walk. You can read them the temperature, describe the way the body fails, point at the sign, and watch them start out into the thing you described. Then you log the time, and you watch the road, and you wait for the search you already know is coming. That is the cost the desert puts on the people stationed at its edge. They see the ending from the parking lot. They deliver the warning that would save lives. And then they carry, for a long time after, the weight of having been right, the particular weight of a person who said the true thing clearly and watched it change nothing. She would be back at that station the next morning and the morning after, reading the same number off the same gauge to the next group of strong, certain people who had already decided she was one more cautious voice to wave away. Some would listen, some would not. The desert would go on sorting them the way it always has, and she would go on standing at the line between the parking lot and the open ground, telling the truth to people who had come a long way, specifically not to hear it. The deadliest thing in Death Valley is not the temperature on the gauge. It is the certainty a strong man carries into a place that has never once been impressed by strength. And the way a group of them will hold each other to that certainty, long past the point where any one of them, alone and honest, would have turned around. The ranger knew the size of that certainty the moment they climbed out of the vehicle. The three men learned it out on the flats in the heat, with the water gone, far too late for knowing to matter. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more, click on your screen.